The Battle of Cannae, fought in 216 BCE, remains one of the most studied and admired military engagements in world history. It marked the third and most devastating clash between the Roman Republic and Carthaginian forces under the command of Hannibal during the Second Punic War. The battle not only demonstrated the peak of Hannibal's tactical brilliance but also served as a sobering turning point for Rome, forcing a complete rethinking of its military doctrines. This clash, fought in the dust and blood of southern Italy, would reshape the Roman military mindset for generations and leave a legacy that still echoes in military academies today. Prelude to annihilation. Prior to Cannae, Hannibal had already achieved two significant victories against Rome, first at the Battle of the Trivia River, and then at Lake Trasimene. In both cases, he had outmaneuvered his Roman adversaries with clever use of terrain, deception, and ambush. While we might call this tactical brilliance, the Romans of the time viewed it with disdain. In their eyes, Hannibal hadn't won honorably, he'd cheated. The Roman military ideal centered around face-to-face combat on flat, open ground, where might and discipline would carry the day. Rome prided itself on the strength of its heavy infantry, arguably the best shock troops of their time. A clean head-on fight was where they believed victory was earned. And after two crushing defeats that they chalked up to trickery, Roman commanders were more determined than ever to confront Hannibal in what they saw as a proper battle. This desire to fight on their own terms would lead to one of the most catastrophic mistakes in Roman history. Rome assembles a juggernaut. Determined to end the threat once and for all, the Roman Senate authorized an unprecedented military buildup. Instead of assigning a standard-sized army to each of its two consuls, both were given two full legions, complete with allied forces. This combined force totaled roughly 86,000 soldiers, one of the largest field armies Rome had ever mustered. However, despite this overwhelming numerical superiority, the Romans remained true to their rigid doctrine. The army was made up primarily of heavy infantry, over 70,000 supported by a mere 6,400 cavalry. As they marched south to engage Hannibal near the town of Cannae, the Romans deliberately chose to stay on wide, flat plains, terrain perfectly suited for their traditional frontal assault tactics. They believed that by forcing a conventional battle, they could finally end Hannibal's unpredictable campaign. Hannibal's army. After years of fighting, Hannibal's army had seen many changes. His losses at previous battles had been replenished, largely thanks to alliances with various Gallic tribes who had been inspired by his victories. By the time of Cannae, Gauls made up roughly a third of this force. In total, Hannibal commanded around 50,000 troops minus 40,000 infantry and 10,000 cavalry. Though outnumbered nearly 2-to-1, he had something the Romans lacked: a coherent, flexible battle plan, and most importantly, cavalry superiority. Two strategies, worlds apart. The strategic visions leading up to the battle could not have been more different. Rome's plan was relatively straightforward and, on the surface, even logical. In both earlier battles, the only real success the Romans had was in the strength of their central infantry pushing through Carthaginian lines. They now aimed to replicate that, on a grand scale. Their tactic was to concentrate forces in the center, break through the Carthaginian line, and divide the enemy army into two fragments that could be defeated piecemeal. To do this, they packed their soldiers into deep, narrow columns in the center with their cavalry and lighter infantry stretched thin on the wings. Their entire formation functioned like a spear meant to pierce through the heart of the Carthaginian army. By contrast, Hannibal prepared the exact opposite. He intentionally kept the center of his line thin, made up mostly of less experienced infantry, while placing his veteran African and Spanish soldiers, the elite of his army, on the wings. His plan hinged on allowing the Romans to penetrate the center, only to trap them in a deadly encirclement. What would follow was nothing short of tactical perfection. The battle begins, a slaughter in slow motion. As both armies took their positions near the river Aufidus, the Romans left behind 10,000 men to guard their camp. This was intended as a strategic move, with the hope that they could later launch a raid on the Carthaginian supply lines. In hindsight, this decision was foolhardy. They were operating under the assumption that Hannibal could be defeated quickly and that their main force could do without those 10,000 extra troops. The rest of the Roman army, 76,000 men, deployed in their chosen formation. Hannibal made the first move. His cavalry, concentrated on the Roman right, launched a fierce and well-coordinated charge. The Roman cavalry, already outnumbered, was unprepared. Confusion reigned when a misunderstood order led some Roman cavalry to dismount at the worst possible moment. Within minutes, the Roman right flank was in complete disarray, and the cavalry was either dead or in full retreat. One of the Roman consuls, possibly Lucius Aemilius Paulus, was reportedly killed during this engagement. Meanwhile, on the Roman left flank, the cavalry remained hesitant. The Carthaginian horsemen danced around them, charging and feinting, refusing to fully engage. They were simply biding their time. The trap springs. As the Roman infantry surged forward, they made the kind of progress they had hoped for. The Carthaginian center slowly gave way, but it was a controlled retreat. Hannibal had instructed his central troops to fall back gradually, drawing the Roman infantry deeper and deeper into the Carthaginian formation. The Romans thought they were winning. They were not. By this point, the victorious Carthaginian cavalry had swept behind the Roman lines and joined the skirmish on the opposite flank. With both wings now collapsing, the remaining Roman cavalry broke and fled. The second Roman consul, Gaius Terentius Varro, joined the retreat. With both Roman flanks annihilated and the enemy cavalry now loose behind them, the bulk of the Roman infantry, tens of thousands, found themselves increasingly hemmed in. At this critical moment, Hannibal gave the order. His elite infantry on the wings pivoted inward and slammed into the Roman flanks. Simultaneously, the cavalry struck from behind. The Roman formation, so dense and compressed, turned into a death trap. There was no room to maneuver, no space to fight. Soldiers were crushed, suffocated, slaughtered where they stood. What began as a battle ended as a massacre. The cost. Rome's bloodiest day. Of the 86,000 Roman troops who began the day, only around 3,400 managed to escape. The 10,000 left behind at the camp were captured. Everyone else was dead. Hannibal's forces suffered just 8,000 casualties. To put this in perspective, Rome lost more than 20% of its adult male population in a single day. By contrast, during the entirety of World War I, Germany lost around 6% of its adult male population. It was not just a tactical defeat, it was a national trauma. Aftermath. The triumph of will. One might reasonably expect that such a crushing defeat would signal the end of Roman resistance. And yet, Rome did something almost no other state in history would have done in the same situation. They refused to surrender. Instead of suing for peace, Rome doubled down. They raised new armies, reevaluated their strategies, and enacted reforms. Most importantly, they stopped trying to beat Hannibal at his own game. The new Roman doctrine focused on attrition and endurance, avoiding pitched battles with Hannibal, and instead isolating him, cutting off his supply lines, and slowly bleeding him dry. It took 13 more years, but eventually, Rome turned the tide. In 202 BCE, at the Battle of Zama, the Roman general Scipio Africanus defeated Hannibal himself on Carthaginian soil, ending the war in Rome's favor. Legacy of Cannae. The Battle of Cannae is often revered as the pinnacle of battlefield tactics, with Hannibal's masterful double envelopment studied by military leaders from Napoleon to Schwarzkopf. Yet beyond its tactical brilliance, Cannae imparts two enduring lessons. First, that even the most stunning military victories are futile without the logistical and political support to exploit them. Hannibal's lack of reinforcements from Carthage meant he could not consolidate or expand on his triumph. And second, that the Roman Republic's cultural resilience was exceptional, as few civilizations could endure such a catastrophic defeat and still refuse to surrender, ultimately turning the tide of the war through sheer will and institutional strength. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the Battle of Cannae, one of history's greatest military maneuvers, make sure to hit that like button. Don't forget to subscribe for more epic stories from history, ancient warfare breakdowns, and strategic analysis. And as always, thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.